One type of storage that you definitely want to consider, and it's something that's a little bit different than what most developers are familiar with when it comes to storage, is the Azure table storage model. And the table storage model, first of all, you need to understand this is what we would call a NoSQL solution. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. This is a solution that if you're a relational database developer and you think table, the first thing you think is, okay, I've got a table, I've got certain fixed set of columns. But with table storage, the first thing is that you are not constrained by a schema. Okay, so you are storing things in a tabular format, but the table structure is not predefined. And in fact, I can store items that have different schemas in the same table structure. Right? And we'll talk a bit more about that. Right? So your client applications dictate the model of the data stored. Now, that doesn't mean that I'd want to create a single table, and let's say I want to store product information and customer information in the same table. That wouldn't make sense. But maybe you're storing product information, and let's say you sell physical products, but you also sell services. Well, the characteristics of both of those are very different. And in a traditional relational model, then you start getting into either having different tables for essentially what is the same thing as a product, or you end up having sparse tables that have a lot of columns because you want all the possible columns for anything you could store in there, but any given record's not going to use that many columns. With table storage, you don't have to worry about that. I could create a table for my products, and the products that are virtual products have maybe different one or more sets of schemas, and then my physical products maybe have other things. Like the idea of color makes sense for a physical product, but color doesn't make sense necessarily if you're selling application development services. Okay, so that's something that's pretty cool. So you can store, again, complex objects with different schemas in the same table. This is absolutely built for massive scale. Right now, and this is what is literally moments ago when I looked this up to make sure this was still the case, what the limits are, and this may change and probably will change over time, so it may be different by the time you view this, but currently the limits are any given item in a table has a maximum per item storage of 1 megabyte. That's a lot of information, right? And the table is part of a storage account, and the storage limit of a storage account is 500 terabytes right now. So that's a lot of data that could be stored in a table. Now that's across the entire storage account, so if you have other different storage, obviously that applies. But you could have, for example, and again, this is what the current default limit is, up to 200 storage accounts in a subscription. So that is a lot of storage. That is, by definition, massive scale. Now, to support that massive scale, data is partitioned, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more. All right, there's two keys. There's a row key and a partition key, and the partition key is actually used as your data starts to scale out to allow the data to scale across multiple physical servers. So that, however, is not anything you interact with, because as said at the outset of this topic, out of the outset of this module, the thing about storage in Azure is that it's all handled for you under the hood. Right? You need to understand some basic things about it, like partitioning, which we'll go into a little bit more in just a moment. But in general, okay, if you understand you have a partition key and things are, well, potentially partitioned, physically partitioned based on that, that's really the only thing you need to know as far as being able to scale out. All right. Now, the data itself is indexed by a combination of that partition key, and every entry has a row key. And that combination of partition key and row key has to be unique, and that gives you very fast lookup across a very large data set.